government had left for Hamar, 70 miles to the north. Undaunted, the paratroopers set off in commandeered buses, but halfway between Hamar and Elverum ran into a roadblock manned by sharpshooters from a local rifle club. In the ensuing battle, the paratroopers suffered heavy casualties and were compelled to retreat. At 19:30 that evening, Vidkun Quisling announced on radio that he was heading a new government and ordered all resistance to cease. At Hamar, the king's ministers were split. The king wanted to fight, but many, including the commander-in-chief, General Lake, counselled capitulation. Late on the 10th of April, the king's supporters prevailed. General Lake was retired, and Colonel Ruge, now promoted to general, was appointed commander-in-chief. At 0600 on the 11th of April, Ruge addressed the nation. Norwegians in areas not yet occupied were to assemble at their mobilization points and contain the German onslaught by setting up roadblocks to isolate German beachheads. The German assault had stunned London. All British plans depended on landings being unopposed. Moreover, on the 7th of April, the Navy had hurriedly disembarked the battalions earmarked for Norway, creating massive confusion. Beset by indecision, the cabinet eventually decided to attack Narvik. Off the coasts of Norway, the British were asserting naval superiority. British submarines torpedoed Karlsruhe and Lützow, and on the morning of the 10th of April, 15 skewers from 800 Squadron and 308 Squadron, operating from the Orkneys, sank Königsberg in Bergen. The first time dive bombers had sunk a warship. Further north, just before dawn on the 10th of April, Captain Warburton Lee took his second destroyer flotilla, Hardy, Hunter, Havoc, Hotspur and Hostile, into Narvik Fjord. Snow was falling and surprise was total. Skillfully avoiding collisions with merchant ships, Hardy launched torpedoes at Hyde Camp, which blew off the German's stern. Following closely in Hardy's wake, Hunter and Havoc opened fire with guns and torpedoes, finishing off Anton Schmidt and badly damaging Hans Ludemann, while Hostile got 2 direct hits on Dieter von Rode. Believing that there were only 6 German destroyers in Narvik and having accounted for 4, Warburton Lee brought his ships in for a second attack, this time narrowly avoiding torpedoes fired by the stricken Dieter von Rode. After inflicting more damage and almost out of ammunition and torpedoes, the flotilla raced for the open sea. Unknown to Warburton Lee, the Germans had more destroyers sheltering inside fjords. As his flotilla raced down the fjord, Wolfgang Zenke, Erich Kullner and Erich Giese emerged from the Herangsfjord and gave chase. And then ahead, coming out of Balgenfjord, were Georg Tyler and Bernd von Arnim. In the van of the British line, Hardy faced the combined fire of the German ships alone. Hit again and again, her bridge a bloody shambles in which Warburton Lee lay dying, Hardy turned to the shore and ran aground. The next in line, Havoc, ran the gauntlet, but the third, Hunter, badly hit in the engine room, lost speed. With visibility obscured by smoke, the 4th destroyer, Hotspur, smashed into Hunter's side, pushing her over and leaving her dead in the water, easy meat for the 3 pursuing destroyers. Reaching the mouth of the fjord, the surviving British destroyers encountered the German ammunition supply ship Roenfels. Havoc opened fire. Roenfels erupted in an enormous explosion, which sent parts of the ship more than 500 feet skyward. The British returned on the 13th of April with 4 modern tribal-class destroyers of nearly 2,000 tons, Bedouin, Punjabi, Eskimo and Cossack, and 5 smaller destroyers, Hero, Forester, Foxhound, Kimberley and Icarus. They were accompanied by HMS Warspite, a 30,000-ton battleship mounting 8 15-inch guns. Near the entrance of the fjord, one of Warspite's Swordfish spotter aircraft, sighting the U-64, sank her with a direct hit by a 100-pound bomb. With Swordfish aircraft providing aerial reconnaissance, Warspite opened up on Kuna, which disappeared up the fjord to join Ludemann, Zenke and Arnim. Rounding a bend, Warspite's 15-inch guns now zeroed in on Kulna and blew her apart. The British force, supported by Swordfish from the carrier Furious, steadily shepherded the Germans to the head of the fjord, from which there was no escape. Fighting with desperate gallantry, the German ships managed to inflict damage on 3 British destroyers, but in the end were all reduced to scrap. It had been just like shelling peas, claimed Captain Crutchley, the commander of Warspite. The next day, Major General Mackesy, the land commander, arrived at Harstad at the entrance to Vestfjord, followed closely by the 24th Guards Brigade. Admiral Lord Cork, the naval commander, also came ashore. The general and the admiral had different sets of orders. Mackesy was to conduct a siege, not attacking Narvik until his logistics were fully established. Lord Cork was to attack up the fjord, while Dietl's forces were still rattled. It soon became clear that Mackesy's troops were untrained and unequipped for operations in snow and mountains. Lord Cork fumed, but there was nothing he could do. Cut off by sea and land, Dietl's force relied on air transport. Ju-52 transports carrying vital stores landed on a frozen lake at Hartvigvan. In addition, 2,600 German sailors, the survivors of the destroyer crews, were equipped from captured Norwegian army depots and formed into 7 naval infantry battalions. Yielding to German pressure, Sweden also allowed supply trains to cross the border. Dietl expected an onslaught, but weeks passed, during which the only activity was skirmishing with Fleischer's newly formed Norwegian 6th Division. Meanwhile, on the 13th of April, news of Narvik encouraged the British to approve a direct assault on Trondheim. 4 days later, the Stukas severely damaged a heavy cruiser off the Norwegian coast, and the attack was cancelled. 2 subsidiary operations already underway should also have been aborted, but they weren't. So, on the 16th of April, the British 146th Infantry Brigade and the French 13th Chasseurs Alpins began landing at Namsos, a small port about 100 miles to the northeast of Trondheim. Together, these formations formed Morris Force. On the same night, Sickle Force, the 148th Infantry Brigade, which comprised only 2 battalions, landed at the small fishing ports of Andalsnes and Molde, which lay 100 miles southwest of Trondheim. Carton de Weert, a brave and resourceful soldier, was alarmed by the state of his troops. Morris' force comprised a few battalions of lightly equipped, not very mobile infantry. On the 20th of April, his supply situation became critical when more than 60 enemy bombers literally flattened Namsos, blowing up an ammunition dump. By this time, Carton de Weert had sent part of Morris' force some 55 miles south along the western shore of Bystadfjord towards Trondheim. The advance guard, some companies of the King's Own Yorkshire Light Infantry, were approaching Verdal on the Inner River, which was only about 40 miles from Trondheim. Other elements of Morris' force were spread all the way back to Namsos. A thaw was melting the ice on Bystadfjord and on its extension Trondheimsfjord. At 0600 on the 22nd of April, German destroyers, which had been trapped in Trondheim, ploughed through the ice up Bystadfjord to land troops on the flank and rear of 146th Brigade. Simultaneously, German troops sortied out of Trondheim, pushing the Coilies north into German roadblocks. In an epic march, the Yorkshiremen avoided German blocking positions by heading inland through waist-deep snow, their wounded and their supplies strapped to requisitioned sledges. By the 23rd of April, the whole of Morris' force was in retreat, falling back to Namsos. Meanwhile, 148th Brigade, instead of cooperating with Morris' force, had moved south of Lillehammer to dig in with the Norwegians either side of Lake Mjosa, which lay at the base of the Gudbrandsdal. On the 21st of April, accurate German artillery fire pushed the defenders back to Farberg, about 5 miles north of Lillehammer, at the head of Lake Mjosa. Here, the Leicesters dug in to act as a rearguard. German ski troops were soon around their flanks, and the British again pulled back, this time to a defile at Vardekampen Ridge, where the valley narrowed to less than a mile in width. The British and Norwegians, occupying a ridge overlooking the valley, expected the Germans would try to drive them from the high ground. Shortly after midday, enemy tanks rolled up the valley floor, smashed through roadblocks, and continued on up the valley, ignoring the small arms fire and light anti-tank rounds, which bounced harmlessly off their armour. Bypassed by the Germans, who now controlled the road to the north, British and Norwegian soldiers were forced up the wooded hillsides by increasingly accurate enemy shelling. Here they broke up into small parties, the better to get back through the forests and mountains.